I am in a little bit of a ranking mood lately. So, with the latest movie in the Fast and Furious franchise, why not rank the Fast and Furious films? And oh boy, there are 11 of them. Contrary to popular belief, there was a spin off that I am including here. So, coming in at the very bottom, the worst of the worst, the movie that I think is the worst Fast and Furious movie, Fast and the Furious 9. This is a movie that I feel like they went too far as some of the action, as far as seeing Vin Diesel somehow swing his car on a vine, on a rope, as if he's Tarzan, as if the car is Tarzan. But not just that, not just the action. I'm mostly talking about from a writing standpoint, bringing the character of Han back from the dead. I like Han as a character. I like that actor. I loved him a part of the franchise, but they should have kept him dead. Honestly, they should have, because the explanation of how he survived, quote unquote, is ridiculous. And I still have trouble believing it to this day. Also, them randomly pulling out of their ass that Dom and Mia had a brother, a long lost brother that nobody ever talked about, that nobody ever knew about, and the fact that it's John Cena. No, I like John Cena as an actor, especially when he's in stuff where he gets to be more of himself, like Peacemaker, or just something to where he can be fun. And this was not it. He was full generic bad guy mode, but this movie also is filled with flashbacks. So many flashbacks of young Dom and young John Cena. And apparently, John Cena's character, not only is he Vin Diesel's brother, but apparently as a teenager he was Hispanic. What? What the hell is going on here? At number 10, The Fate of the Furious. We talk about writing. There's a reason why these movies, in my opinion, are at the bottom of the list. The writing here, where it's, oh hey, Dom turns on the family. The one thing that Dom always, just forever talks about in every single Fast and Furious movie. Family. Family. It's all about family. Well, this feels like if the Fast and Furious was a TV show, you would have one random offshoot episode of what if Dom turned on the family? What if Dom did everything against what he stood for? What if Dom turned bad? And it would probably be one of the worst or least interesting episodes of that TV show. Well, they made a whole movie about it. And bringing in Charlize Theron, who's a great actress, just very underwhelming and underserved here as the villain, and her having the whole, we kidnapped your baby. Oh yeah, Dom has a baby that he didn't even know about from the Elena character from Fast 5. And they fridged the Elena character, which kind of pissed me off. And also, this was the continuation, because it's not like it's the first time, but it's the continuation of, oh hey, this character used to be a villain in a previous movie. Well, now, Jason Statham, you have graduated to the barbecue. You have graduated to becoming a part of the family, even though it was reluctant, and even though his dynamic with The Rock and how they went back and forth and how they didn't like each other and how they were in constant competition with each other. Even though all of that stuff was great, it still didn't make this movie all that better. At number 9, we're going to go with the spin-off, Hobbs and Shaw. I'm actually surprised that they haven't tried more spin-offs, that we haven't gotten more spin-offs, especially because when you get to the most recent Fast and Furious movie, there are so many side characters, there are so many characters in general, that you could probably have 5 different spin-off movies going on all at the same damn time. This felt more like a vehicle for The Rock, felt more like another big action movie for The Rock to do and to show his star power and their dynamic. In Fate of the Furious, it was kind of odd because as good as it was, they kind of make up and they become, at the very least, friendly at the end of that film. So to go backwards and almost redo the same exact situation, the same exact relationship, the same exact arc for these two characters to have, I get it, because what else would you do with them? They're not that interesting other than the fact that they didn't get along previously, but it did feel redundant. Black Superman folks, that's the biggest takeaway that I got from Idris Elba as the villain. I love Idris Elba, but man, it's just whenever you get cast in the Fast and Furious movie, especially as the villain, you're just there. You're there to play an archetype. You're there to play an obstacle. And the fact that they had this experimental procedure that turned him into a superhuman. I know that we joke. I know that we have fun with the fact that the Fast and Furious movies have become this comic book superhero like level of action, and how we say that the characters have plot armor and how they have somehow superhuman strength. But this movie actually doubled down and put it into the script of like, hey, we have a villain that has superhuman strength. I couldn't believe it. I almost want to respect it and give her props. Number 8, Fast X. This is the most recent film, and realistically, writing-wise and the over-the-top action, none of that has gotten better. It hasn't. It's more of the same. It's more of the same dumbness. It's more of the same unbelievableness. But I will say this. John Cena coming back as Dom's brother. This time, a good guy, of course. He joined the cookout. Him being able to let loose and be more of himself and be more fun, that helped tremendously, and I enjoyed his scenes. But Jason Momoa as the villain, as over the top and as goofy as he was something that I enjoyed watching on screen. He was something that was unpredictable, that was like, what's he going to do next? He was the Joker to Dom's Batman. Number 7, Too Fast, Too Furious. There was a time where I really enjoyed this film, really had fun with this movie, especially because I was just young and dumb. But the more that I've rewatched it and the more years that gone by, I sort of realized that this is probably where the bad writing starts when it comes to Fast and Furious, right? You have Brian O'Connor, Paul Walker's character, who let Dom go at the end of the first film. He then, in this movie, goes on the run, running away from cops, makes it all the way to Miami, gets picked up by the cops in Miami, and instead of arresting him because he's a former cop that turned bad and helped out a criminal, no, they just recruit him for another undercover mission. Well, Paul Walker saying "cuz" 5 times or more was a little annoying. Eva Mendes, hot as hell. Number 6, Fast and Furious Tokyo Drift. This is the movie that I probably didn't like when I first saw it because it was a brand new cast and it was something that I felt like I didn't recognize just as far as the characters. But the more I watched it and the older it got, the more I appreciated the writing and appreciated the directing. It's the first directing for Justin Lin in the franchise, and I think he's directed some of the better Fast and Furious movies. Yes, Lucas Black is not a great actor, and yes, that accent is a little grating to listen to all the time. But I think his character and I think the situation of how he winds up in Tokyo and he's a fish out of water, Bow Wow, I could honestly take out of this movie. In fact, his presence kind of brings it down. But everything else, as far as the villain, the Drift King, and everything that goes into the culture of drifting, something that I never realized or knew that that was a real thing. And I was fascinated by that. The introduction of Han, the character, who I thought was great and probably should have been the main character, if we're being honest. Number 5, Fast and Furious. Technically Fast and Furious 4. This is a movie that I think doesn't get enough love, especially from fans who used to say that it's the weakest of the franchise because it wasn't the original and it wasn't what Fast 5 later became, right? It was in that in-between phase where I think they were starting to transition. I think they knew they wanted to get to 5. They knew they wanted to get to the action level that they got to, but they weren't quite there yet. I think this movie really rounds itself out by bringing back the original cast, bringing back the original characters, and showing why the franchise needs Paul Walker and Vin Diesel and Mia and Letty. Just those characters together is what brings that heart and brings that dynamic that they all had. Some of it is also even a rehash of the first movie as far as Paul Walker being back to being a cop and back in the same situation on whether or not he should help Dom. And the death of Letty, initially I hated it because I just thought, man, this effing sucks. But at this point, they brought her back, so who really cares? Number 4, Fast and Furious 6. I could almost be talked into putting this even higher on the list because I think this movie is very solid. Luke Evans as the villain, I think this is one of the better performances of him just being flat out evil and cold. You have The Rock. This is the first movie where The Rock recruits Vin Diesel and his team in order to work for them, in order to get somebody who is supposedly worse than them. You have a lot of Michelle Rodriguez's character not remembering who she is because she's now back, and Dom is basically trying to get her to come back to him and fall in love with him again. All of that might be a little too telenovela. Michelle Rodriguez having that cool badass fight with Gina Carano. Number 3, Furious 7. I almost want to put this even higher if I could, because this is what I think the last good Fast and Furious movie in the franchise. I'm talking about the movies have been rough ever since, but this is the last one where they somehow were able to balance the group dynamic, the family dynamic, and make that believable, make that down to earth, while having that over the top action to where, yes, it does go overboard. You have the scene where they go into the car and they go from building to building. Believe me, I'm not trying to pretend like the action here is any more believable than what we get, but for whatever reason, this was like the last that I could handle, right? This was the last of that action, that level of action that I thought, all right. So I still can't believe, though, that The Rock clenched his arm. He flexed to break the cast from his broken arm. And then also at the very end, there was that one moment when Vin Diesel stomped on the ground to break it, and that's how he defeats shit. So, believe me, the more I talk about it, the more I go like, no, this is over the top. But it's the Paul Walker-ness. It's the Paul Walker tribute. It's us knowing beforehand that this was the last Paul Walker movie. It's the nice moments, the heartfelt song, and the tribute at the end that just, I don't know how it doesn't bring you to tears when you watch this. What a perfect send-off this movie would have been. Number 2, Fast 5. And I know many people would have this as their number 1. I don't blame you. Fast 5 is what brought the franchise to a whole new level. What slowly did the Avengers, the MCU, the building of a universe, it did that almost even before anything else. Who knew that the previous characters that came in the previous 4 movies, bringing them back and having them come back together in this heist of a group and having them in Brazil trying to steal so many millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars from this all-time crime lord. I mean, not only was that plot interesting, but it was the first time that we got this dynamic. It was the first time we saw a lot of these characters interact. You have The Rock's introduction as this no-nonsense, no bullshit, badass guy, soldier, who just, he comes in because he's the only man that can potentially go after Vin Diesel. And at the time, there was a lot of talk behind the scenes in Hollywood of Vin Diesel and The Rock, this rivalry that they're having with their movies, that they've kind of copied each other's career, and that they're both sort of colliding. So to have that be in the movie and to have their fight where they're literally throwing each other through walls, I didn't say it's realistic, but they gave us the fight that we kind of deserved to see. And then that ending, that third act of them driving through with the safe in Brazil through the streets and causing the chaos. It's a type of action that I never thought I'd get from this franchise, and I was there for the entire thing. But for my number 1 favorite Fast and Furious movie, you could probably tell, obviously, because I haven't mentioned it, it's the original, The Fast and the Furious. I, even more so today, appreciate how grounded and how down to earth this movie is. You might be somebody that likes more of the action, likes more of the over the top stuff more, but I remember when I first saw this, me being somebody who didn't give a fuck about cars, didn't give a fuck about that culture, but being fascinated by how it all worked, being fascinated by that something like this existed, where there were street races out there and they were doing all this illegal activity, but they made it look fun, and that they did have their moral code, especially when it came to Dom and his family and the connection that they had. I loved following Paul Walker being undercover. And yes, his job was to catch them, but then once he sees that they're all good people, once he falls in love with the Mia character, it became a catch a mouse of, is he going to get caught? Is he going to be able to do his job? Or is he going to do what he does, what he ends up doing at the end? I really enjoy that first film. I really enjoy the music, the soundtrack, and I think a lot of my love for the Fast and Furious movies still are dependent on how much I enjoy this first film. So guys, let me know in the comments below, not only what do you think of my list, but what are your favorite Fast and Furious movies? What are some of your least favorite, the worst? Thanks for watching. Like, comment, subscribe. Later!